Now, as we have already understand about the components, so previously we learned about the components, and the next is that we'll see the component lifecycle. So whenever we mention that the Hilt automatically creates and destroys the instance of generated component classes following the life cycle of the corresponding Android classes, which basically means that Hilt will automatically create and destroy the instance of each of the components that we have mentioned. So if we mention about the singleton component, like we have mentioned in our application over here, whenever we mention it as a singleton component over here, it basically is created on the application on create is called. So whenever our application class get created, whenever on create is called over here, at that time this is created and it will get destroyed on whenever our application on destroy is called. So basically the singleton means that as long as the lifecycle is as long as our application lives. Similarly, we have activity retained component, which is on activity create. Whenever our activity is created, it is also get created and it is get destroyed when our on destroyed is called on our activity. So this is basically depend on the life cycle of the Android classes. So if you need to be a bit familiar of the life cycle of the Android classes. And it's basically mentioned here the activity retain component is a bit different than the activity component that we have over here. It says that it lives across the configuration change, so which means that it can preserve or it can retain its state whenever you have a configuration change. Like let's say whenever your screen gets rotated, the activity basically gets recreated. So it can survive that particularly configuration change. So at that time we use the activity retained component, and its life cycle depend on the activity itself. And then we have a view model. So view model is created, and when the view model is created, and it is destroyed whenever our view model is get destroyed. And also the activity component that we have, it is created on whenever our activity on create is called, and then it get destroyed whenever our activity on destroyed is called. And for the fragment component, we have fragment on attached. So whenever fragment get attached to the activity, then it's created and then it's get destroyed on the or whenever the fragment on destroy lifecycle is called. And the view component, we have view on the super, and it get whenever the view get destroyed. Similarly, we have view with the fragment component, same as the view lifecycle, and also it's the destroyed is also same as the view lifecycle. Service component, which is for the service, whenever on create is called for the service, then it get created, and whenever on destroy is called on the service, then it get destroyed. So this is a life cycle of the component that we basically mentioned. So whenever we mention over here like singleton component or the activity component, so this is basically binded to the Android specific classes. So if you said singleton is created on the application on create and get destroyed on the on destroyed. So you can see it has some layer system or the hierarchy over here. On the top layer you have a singleton component, and then we have activity retain, and then we have a view model, and then the activity component, fragment component, view with the fragment component, and the service component. The service component is at the lowest layer you can see, and the singleton component is on the top layer or on the highest layer. So which basically depend, it's also on the life cycle. So it's basically depend on the life cycle. You can see that this singleton component can live at more than your view model and the Android retain activity or the activity component. So whenever you're, let's say, okay, let's talk about the view model and the Android component. So view model is always lives longer than the activity component. That's why you can see it's on top of the activity component. And then we have similarly a fragment component. You can see the activity component lives longer, or the activity lives longer than the fragment. That's why it's on top of the fragment component. Similar to the view, and the view component, the fragment lives longer than the view. That's why we have a fragment component on top of it. So this is a component life cycle, and this is that you need to understand, because whenever if you need to know that when you want to use a singleton component and when you want to use an activity component or the fragment component, so we don't use our use of our application memory, or we don't assign up too much memory, because whenever you use a singleton, and it will be used or available throughout the application, which will hold all of the references. So for some of your, just for your fragment use, when you say that create it on the fragment and just destroy it after the fragment, so you don't have to make use of the singleton component, because it will live throughout the life cycle of your Android application. So this is some of the best practice that we can follow using the component life cycle.